Let's work this thing. No, Henry's gone back on already. Okay, my talk is entitled Let's Relate to the Future. And when I was putting this together, I kind of knew that we were going to be in the British Museum. And so I was thinking about a title that would actually be relevant to the theme of the conference and also to our actual physical location. And I'm sure that some of us have taken a cheeky 5 minutes to walk around the British Museum in between breaks and coffee breaks, etc. And probably related to sort of enjoyed some of the architecture. Okay, cool. Thanks, boss. Some of the exhibits, etc. And really kind of taken quite a lot of that and kind of related to the past. I thought, well, if we can relate to the past, how can we relate to the future? And when you walk around this museum, you see lots of exhibits, you know, created by people of their time, using the processes, the materials that were available to them, and the technologies, of course, that were available to them as well, against various political and cultural backdrops of their day. So if we can relate to the past relatively easily, and especially when it's been packaged up in a great location like this, how can we relate to the future? And this took me about 5 months to think about. So this is why this presentation could be a bit interesting. And if you haven't seen me speak before, I do go at quite a canter. So no looking at cats on the internet, heads down, just watch me, otherwise you might miss something really cool. There we go, bit of a warning. So let's have a look at the future that we're all supposed to be designing for, okay? So future, are you out there? Right, there's 7.4 billion people in the world at the moment. In about 4 to 5 years' time, and I'm only looking 4 to 5 years ahead and all these things, there's going to be 7.8 billion of us, right? It's crazy. That's about one new USA coming to a world near you, okay? And we're all going to have one of these glued to our faces in the same time period, okay? I think something like 27,000 a day are going to be hitting the streets, so it's an awful lot of stuff to design for. And it's Christmas soon, they're all going to be everywhere. And who could forget the Internet of Things, the I-O to the T? If anybody remembers the Generation game, it's very similar. So these stats are related by, from Ofcom, which say that each British person, okay, because UK related, is going to have about 5 things in their house that's going to be related to them or something like that. Anyway, it's crazy and it's mind-numbingly boring sometimes. But also, of course, as Pamela has also really spoken about at length, and some of our speakers did yesterday as well, we're not really going to be talking to humans because we're going to be talking to all these people, right? Or their siblings or their offspring. I've just got a wrong brand. I've just got an Amazon Echo at home. The honeymoon period is not over. My wife thinks I'm having an affair, that's fine. And my children think it's absolutely fascinating because they can talk to this thing that plays nursery rhymes, okay? It is coming, we all know it. Slightly two-dimensional, and you've got to teach it a few things, but apart from that, we're getting on great, just like a normal relationship, really. And if you're like me,
Tea Earl Grey, hot.
You've spent about 25 years waiting to order one of these from a replicator. You can get cakes printed in 3D machines, but I'm still waiting to order tea Earl Grey hot. Still hasn't happened, but we will be designing for it. And talking about the design of things, of course, Apple, the thing that we all love, or the company we all love and wish we'd probably founded or had shares in, is going to be worth about half of Africa in total within, I think it probably already is, within about sort of 4 to 5 years' time. These numbers are meaningless, okay, I know, but just pointing out the gravity of the change in terms of the world market. And of course, talking about cash, we won't need cash, will we? Because we're all going to be using contactless things, devices, tap and pay. And this figure is actually saying there's going to be a 10-fold increase in 4 to 5 years' time of tap and pay exchanges. So in other words, the sort of low-level stuff that we're used to using Apple Pay for or just contactless cards. And you think about it in Hollywood, the impact on Hollywood, there probably won't be actually any sort of briefcases or suitcases of crisp $50 bills, will there? No, it's going to be like a zoom in on an app for the baddies to show. And if that's how we're all going to be paying things, Gartner is also saying that we're actually going to be competing on the experience we offer, not the product or the product lines that we also offer. So they're saying that by the year 2020, 80% of all businesses out there are going to be competing on the experience they offer as their key differentiator, not products. So there's still going to be a job for some of us, which is good news. So all in all, that's the future, right? My job is done. Can I go home? There's going to be 8 billion of us. We're all going to be glued to this thing, okay, as we walk around the street. Our shirt will be updating our kettle, talking to our doctor, updating our prescription, watering our roses as we walk down the street and give each other nettostatically charges, and everything's going to be absolutely fine. So I thought, well, that really can't be the future, so I spoke to a trusted advisor who said this: there are known unknowns, Charlie. There are also known knowns, unknown unknowns, and unknown knowns. I don't know him, I'm joking. What we came to the conclusion was that it's actually quite hard to design for the future. You know, how do you design for something that you don't know anything about yet? You think you know, as some of those stats have just suggested, you think you know what's going to happen, but you don't really know until things happen. So I thought, okay, well, let's bring this back. We don't really know what the technology is going to be like. We think we know what it's going to be like. How is it all going to come back to us? So I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine, introducing a human. Now, originally this slide said Mr. A Human, and after a bit of conversation with my illustrious leader, Mr. Norris, of course, we were talking about the original Vitruvian man, which was actually half man, half woman, and preceded Leonardo's version by several hundred years, 1,000, 1,500 years, I think it was, something like that. Anyway, and when I was talking about people do things against the current political and cultural backdrops of the day, Leonardo was just doing exactly the same thing, and it was kind of macho to be man. But my point is this, is that barring a major, homage to Elon Musk there, barring a major anthropological event, we don't change as often as technology. We cite technology as revolutionizing our lives, but actually we evolve. And so the Darwinian theory about evolution remains. But we talk about technology, how it's revolutionized lives, it's changed our lives. You could argue that perhaps it has when you talk about things in your back pocket, such as phones. And if you're like me, you often see a huge number of graphs like this. Okay? And I'm secretly just going to say, I'm bored of seeing these, because all these ever say is like, yay! We're getting better at developing something that we call technology. And when we take a retrospective view, and if you do walk around this museum, you'll see a few things. I was in the long gallery, I think it's called, yesterday, in one of the coffee breaks, took 5 minutes out. I was looking at some of the kit that Sir Isaac Newton used to use. You know, he would have called that technology. It probably wouldn't have made it to this graph, but he was using it and discovering things. But what we're constantly asked to do is to look to the future and design for the stuff up here, the stuff that has not yet happened, the stuff that the graph isn't really quite sure where to go. And as we learned yesterday, when we see some of these graphs, these exponential graphs, they do take a wobble. And as many of us know, you know, the uptake of technology often rests in the hands of the marketing department, and adoption curves and things like that, and price points and other competing forces that we may not necessarily be able to predict. So if that's the future, again, the stuff that we have to design for, how are we going to relate to it? So I think these are the things, and I think this dovetails quite nicely with Pamela's talk actually, these are the things that we are going to have to design for in the future. They are your design constants. Okay? They are human values. Because I think that they are the only constants that we can safely predict are still going to be in place in the future. Whether or not that future is a year, 4 to 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 100 years, it doesn't really matter. So barring Armageddon or something genetically extremely interesting, we aren't likely to change much as human beings. And for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to talk about actually just 2 of this Holy Trinity. And these are some of the human values that I actually personally really take quite a lot from. I'm going to be talking about recognition and trust. I was going to be talking about tangibility, but we haven't got time. And if you're interested, there'll be a blog article floating around later, which you can take some interest in. And the reason why I think that recognition and trust are really, really important, in this very, very simple diagram, is that if you think about it, surrounding this is a circle about relationships. And in order to incubate the nucleus of a relationship, especially when you're talking about the 2 sides of technology and humans, you need to really fire it up and incubate it with human values. Because if you don't have any sort of human value to incubate something with, you know, what's the purpose? What's it really going to give you? And also, I don't believe that recognition and trust have gone out of fashion yet, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So, the first one, design for recognition. Let's start off with a definition. I'll take a sip of water. Suffering from cold, nothing alcoholic, I assure you. You don't have to believe me, that's fine. Those that know me. So recognition, there are lots of definitions out there. I think this one actually sums it up quite well, and I'm just going to read it on the screen. So it's the identification of a thing or person from previous encounters or knowledge. Identification of a thing, just think about Pamela's presentation just a moment ago, or person from previous encounters, or knowledge. Okay. And some of you will know that recognition is one of Nielsen's top 10 heuristic principles for interaction design. You know, recognition of patterns, symbols, shapes, colours, etc. The stuff that we kind of see every day, relate to. And as humans, we're not binary things, okay? We're not actually programmed 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Anybody who's ever done any sort of biological stuff, you'll look at DNA. It's not really programmed in that sort of beautiful sequence necessarily. It's a beautiful thing to look at, but it's actually quite complicated to unravel. And what we ask of recognition in our lives, when we're going through sort of interactions of our daily sort of routines and things, is that we ask services and products to sort of understand where we are, understand the context of use, and kind of to use an old thing that we used to use in a previous life of mine, you know, show me you know me. When I'm interacting with a piece of kit, show me that you know me, or show me you understand me, you know, so that my input is rewarded with some form of output. And as humans, we understand that inanimate objects don't really do it for us. Okay, that a pile of books, an oven, and some big biros, okay, for example, some pens, they don't really do things for us, you know. You could argue that if that was a Kindle, a smart oven, and an Apple Pencil, that perhaps there is some form of real kind of two-way recognition going on. But that's another story. And to me, I like to say this quite a lot because I think it's quite pertinent, especially when we talk about human relationships, or relationships with technology, which is that your digital bedside manner matters, okay? As designers, we're often given hospital cases to fix. So this is where it came from. You often get presented with a patient in a bed, if you like, metaphorically speaking, and you have to attend to that patient to fix it. And the best way you can do that, because often there's a client relationship going on as well, that you have to give them great care and attention and really understand their needs before you fix things. And the reason why recognition plays its part in this world of digital is that it gives you positive regard. Now, this is a scientifically backed quote, which I've just clipped, that recognition gives you positive regard. It enables its receiver to have a sense of self-worth. So recognition as a human value matters because it enables you to give the receiver to have a sense of self-worth. It's actually valuable. It really does give something. And also recognition acts as a reinforcement of the preceding or proceeding act. And it generates positive regard in that way. And each time we interact with something, we understand something, we start to trust something, which I'll come on to in a minute. So that sort of slightly academic cue, let's have a look at some examples. So, and I'm going to talk about recognition in a way that is not hi Charlie screenshot from Amazon, and it's not you may also be interested in from Netflix, okay? That is not recognition. That is someone saying let's put some form of salutation into an experience. So we see this quite a lot, right? You know, some sort of map thing sort of pops up. It's increasingly popping up with lots of latest sort of iOS releases, especially in the Apple world, where it kind of goes, based upon what you normally do, if we have this right, you're going to need this information to help you plan for the rest of the day. Safe commute, love Apple. Because it's using technology to the full. It understands what you might be doing and suggests how it might help you. Does anybody actually use this? No. But it pops up on a regular basis, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I don't know where that falls down, but it's fine. Okay. Another example, Monzo. They used to be called Mondo, one of the upstarts. You sort of set your settings, and it kind of says, okay, you need to top up your account. And because you've set your previous settings and we know a bit about you, when you do this thing, this will be the end result, and everything will be happy. And this will be the outcome, love Monzo. And if you take a broader kind of experience perspective, DPD, okay, one of the logistics companies, delivery companies, yeah, they might not be the biggest, but they are certainly the most end-user focused because they've thought about their digital bedside manners. They know it matters. And so what they do is they send you a text. And what they really say is, we know you, we recognise that waiting in all day for a delivery can be a pain in the butt. We understand that taking a day off sometimes or working from home isn't an easy thing for you. So what we're going to do, we'll tell you ahead when it's going to be arriving in terms of day. We'll also tell you who the driver is. But just sort of before that moment, we are going to send you a text We're going to use something that is relatively old school to give you your options if you want to do something. It's like in-flight support, right? So, they do that very, very, very well. And also, we also use lots of settings. I'm going to scoot over that a little bit, because really settings are everything. Every single device has some form of settings. You've always got to set something up. And that is recognition to the core. You have to set something up so it's going to recognise you and what you want from it. Therefore, you're going to have a happy bit of relationship with that technology. So, and I think that frames the design constant quite well about settings. Does anybody know what this is? Yay! Yeah, it's a time punching thing card. Okay, this is a clocking in machine from the late 1800s. Okay, and this is all about recognition, giving empowerment to the end user. Each worker would be given a key. They would stick it into this machine. They would turn it. It would stamp a piece of paper at the back. And when they left the factory, for example, at the end of the day, they would do the same thing. And therefore, you had this unambiguous tracing of data. And what this really is this is recognition, giving empowerment to the worker. There was no doubt about how long they've been working. And by the way, that's the front end, this is the back end, just to prove it's holistic design, right? And it would record the worker's times, and therefore it was all about saying, we recognise who you are because it's slightly anonymised, right? You're kind of awake and everyone just gets the key. It's not that personal, but it kind of is really, because that's you carry it around with you, and you stick it in and you punch it. And in the past, we've always loved symbols, and recognition is something that we can go back and look at and take a lot from. There we go. This is a pub sign. This is the Red Lion. You probably have all worked that out. If you go to the pub, you kind of understand this thing. It doesn't have to say the red line necessarily swinging under it. And why is that important? Because in the past, when most of us were illiterate serfs living in hovels covered in mud, we couldn't read. And we couldn't really stop to ask for directions because nobody really kind of knew stuff. But you would go around a town, if you were meeting somebody, looking for the red line. You would just look for the sign. Back to the Nielsen thing, simple sort of pattern of recognition of symbols, etc. That's what he did. Does anybody know what the middle thing is? No? Okay, that is a tally stick split in two. So the term tally comes from this. What would happen is in the past, because you didn't have a passport, you had no ID card, you had no driving license, you had nothing really apart from the clothes on your back and maybe a straw hut to live in. If you wanted to have a contract with somebody or you wanted to borrow some money, you'd get a stick or a pole. And this was called a tally stick, because what they used to do is they used to put notches on it and engrain the contract on a piece of wood in sort of symbols, etc. And often they would have a religious authority who would then, because they could write, would write some form of Latin inscription on it to say that this was a legitimate contract. They'd get that stick and then they would slice it in two. So, for example, the person lending the money would keep half, the person receiving the loan would take the other half. And then in a few years' time, assuming that the person who needed to repay the money hadn't been disfigured by some terrible medieval disease, they would bring that stick back to that point, to the point where the person that lent the money was living, for example, and they would match those sticks up. And that was the form of recognition, to say, I am who I say I am, and I've come here to redeem my debt. That happens today, right? Because we get receipts. That was going on for hundreds of years. It's the recognition. The other day, I took something back to John Lewis. They wrote down a return code on a barcode, a piece of paper with a barcode, and the middle of that barcode was perforated. And they split it down the middle. They kept one half, and they gave me one half. Exactly the same as tally sticks. It's recognition and understanding that you need that assurance from something to take away. Medals are self-explanatory. But if we transpose that today, if we want to find out where the red line is, we've got to get this, right? We don't even bother asking anybody. We just take out our phone and we'll find it on the map. With tally sticks, it's kind of on an app. It's trying to tell you how much your loan might be, or indeed some form of paperwork necessary. It doesn't have to be digital, but it's some form of recognition. And with medals, social media, crazy. It's like, it's love, and if you're lucky, you get some Mario points. So that's a bit of a transposing from the past to today, but we're talking about tomorrow. Enter another friend. Now, this is a great quote that I don't actually remember when I watched the film, but when I Googled it, it kind of made sense. That's what done it, right? And what I'm really trying to say is that as machine learning takes over in the future, we're going to have to design for interactions and moments of recognition to be used by non-human interfaces for the use of humans. So we'll have to do it for ourselves, that we love and understand. We're also going to have to use it for not necessarily the kind of elementary ones we have today, but the future ones that I've just signed up for as a result of Pamela's talk. I don't know how much they're going to be, Pam, but I think they're going to be astronomically expensive, right? A couple of £1,000 or something. But I still signed up because I like the idea. So, I mean, they'll become more evident and explicit in our lives, and we are going to have to design for this artificial intelligence thing. And we will have the challenge of delivering meaningful language responses appropriate to the context of use. And that's what we're going to have to do. And that means empowering artificial devices to understand us and recognise what we need, who we are, and what we're after. So that's recognition. The next one is this, design for trust. Okay, we're going to start with another definition. So I've talked about recognition, and now I'm going to talk about trust. This is the second one. The definition here is that trust is a firm belief in the reliability, the truth, or ability of someone or something. Again, these definitions, I think, have been sort of written with one eye on the future, because they kind of talk about accountants for recognition, and now they're talking about ability of someone or something. So they're kind of covering off, future robotics, perhaps, who knows. And why does trust matter? Well, this is a great quote, really, which is, trust develops when behaviour matches expectations. If something performs as we expect, we kind of start to believe it, we start to trust it. And if you believe most of the business press, and you've maybe got a background in some sort of, from academia in terms of business, you understand that trust is one of the most valuable business commodities we can have. The greater the trust, it provides sustainable lifetime customer value, and it drives advocates of your brand. And that really matters, because trust can then become a key tenet of your long-term business strategy. And trust really does live for advocacy. Now, apologies for this model here. It's a slightly slimmed down version of something that you may have seen before. There's a bit of a conclusion of things, a bit of something of my own invention. This is what I call the advocacy plane. And if trust underpins the experience strategy in many ways, it starts to sort of emerge from capabilities. When I'm talking about capabilities, I'm talking about getting the basics right. I'm talking about getting the basic functions. I'm getting the basic things like reliability, etc. So if it sort of matches your expectations, you start to trust something. Now, I'm going to get in trouble with somebody who just spoke a moment ago, because I'm going to use something that I blatantly stole and have sought permission for already to reuse. So this is something I've stolen, actually, from one of Pamela's previous presentations, you see. This is about, let's call this the emotional intelligence sort of triangle thing, okay? So where is trust? Trust is right there. Trust underpins connection. It underpins identity and delivers meaning. So humans don't just like trust. We need trust, and we need to have it designed for us. And I know that Simon's spoken about this before as well. And I'm also going to get into real hot water, because if you go back to Marketing 101, you get the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Now, you may say that we don't need to use that anymore, and we need to decide it. But the problem we have is that it still has meaning. It still has some sort of merit to discuss. And I remember first module, I think, in my degree, so I'm going back to October 1993. I remember that being rolled out. So you've got to learn about this. This is about everything. But it still remains current. Safety and trust are aligned. It starts to spark things about security and assurance. Okay? Trust matters. Has anybody heard this quote in passing? It's quite a famous financial kind of press quote thing. So Warren Buffett, worth, I don't know, billions, the Berkshire Investment Group, etc. He said it takes 20 years to build up a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And I think that's quite a good quote, but I think it's quite old, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But just think about that. He says it takes 20 years to build up a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. So in other words, you can work really, really hard to get something, and then you just make an absolute cock up and you can lose everything. Who recently has been stopped in the street by somebody with a clipboard and been asked, not for money, but been asked their opinion about which brands they most trust? Okay, nobody. Well, it seems to happen quite a lot anyway. Well, it used to happen quite a lot. But often, especially in the UK, if you get stopped by somebody, these are the kind of brands that people quote. First Direct's an interesting one. It doesn't have a high street presence. It's part of HSBC, but still it's often quoted as being one of the most trusted high street brands. And I think that's quite interesting, because a lot of these brands have been around for decades, maybe centuries. Our parents or our peers, etc., said you need to trust these brands. And they often make it into the most trusted brand list. But I did a bit of a survey, believe it or not. a couple of months ago, and in the office as well. And I spoke to friends and family, everybody aged between the age of sort of 13, I think, and about 45-ish, maybe. But especially the younger ones, I said, which brands do you trust? And they came out with these. It's interesting, isn't it, that they do not consider the ones at the top. They have no, because some of them weren't necessarily financially mature, but the Generation Zers, the people that kind of age between, I don't know, 10, 12, 13, and 15, 16, etc., they're kind of post-millennials-ish. They have no concept of brands that they need to trust having any high street presence. It doesn't matter about their physical presence. It matters whether or not it's digital, it's on their phone, and does it do what they do. And this is another quote here from Ernest Hemingway, which says, the best way to learn if you can trust somebody is to trust something. And when you think about designing the future, you need to start thinking about speaking to those Generation Zers, because their life is in an app, or it's a game. Okay? They communicate using pictures. Text is almost too difficult. But in their world, if they have an app, that is their world. That's it. If that app cocks up, so through an update or a release, what they tend to do is they speak to their friends if they've had the same problem, and then they start to hibernate that app. They start to put it in the corner, and they will often truff it. Now, I've just had the wrap-up talk sign from Henry. I'm just telling you that's why he's flapping. So I'm going to drop just a few slides here, if I may. So apologies why I'm going to skirt through something. So bear with me. I was going to talk about Uber and trust, but I think that was spoken about the other day. Okay. By the way, if you can read really quickly, you're going to get a lot from this. Okay. But I'm scooting. So I was talking about trust and how Uber, as a new entrant, has had lots of issues. But I was also going to say that Uber have now countered that by developing lots of features from their app. And everything is sort of, trust-based. They talk about the security of people travelling, etc. And every time we got into Uber, there's going to be some sort of axe murder driving, and you would end up being dismembered and left by the side of a motorway. But they counter those kind of awful things in the press by actually focusing on the features that actually support trust. So they've actually designed trust for disruption. And as one of my colleagues mentioned the other day, Hannah, she said, wouldn't it be great actually if Uber would just offer female drivers, for female passengers? And why not? Maybe that's what they've got in their next update. Who knows? So just to wrap up, really sorry I've been talking a bit too long. Recognition and trust are only two of the human values that I've spoken about. There are an awful lot out there. And what I'm really saying is they're not your design currency, they're actually our design currency. I think it's a bit presumptuous to say that only we can own them. I think in our roles and our jobs, we need to take it out there and say that they are our design currency. And please, if you have budget, don't waste it on talking just to the people that are going to be using your products today. Think about who is going to use it tomorrow and find some cash, find some time, find some resources to understand the people that are going to be using this stuff tomorrow. Because by the time they get to that point and the technology is available, you might have that competitive advantage. And don't throw the human out with technology, kind of thing. That's it. Thanks. Sorry.